In the hush of a sleeping town, a low whistle echoes across the fields. Steel and smoke stretch toward a horizon once ruled by silence. This is a story of how America began to move faster, louder, farther, not with horse or sail or muscle but with iron. This is the story of the railroads that changed everything. Before the tracks, a nation on foot and river in 1830, America was still a land of roads carved by wheels and rivers that served as the country's wagons creaked along muddy trails. Ferries groaned across waters. A journey of 100 miles could take days. Weather decided fate. Roads disappeared in winter. In the South, cotton followed rivers like veins through the plantation economy, a way to collapse distance and make the impossible feel just a bit more reachable. In the Midwest, ox carts carried wheat over hills that once belonged only to wind. Just 23, enough to connect Baltimore to the rolling countryside beyond. But by 1860, there would be over 30,000 miles of track, a web of iron stretching through forest, swamp, mountain, and prairie. Floods erased bridges. Cities lived and died by how easily goods could reach them or couldn't. Travel was personal. You could recognize every bend in the road between your home and the nearest town. People still traveled by packet boat, horse-drawn coach, or on foot. Your world was what you could walk. In New York, goods came in through harbors and moved along the Erie Canal. And yet the nation dreamed of something more. A faster way, a straighter way. By 1830, there were only 23 miles of railroad track in the United States. And with that web came the transformation of everything. The first engines and the shock of speed. The first trains did not look like machines of destiny. They clattered, hissed, and bucked. Early locomotives often broke down or jumped the rails entirely, which famously lost a race to a real horse in 1830 after a belt slipped loose. At best, they were oddities, steam-powered wagons on narrow iron trails. Trains didn't need rest or feed. They ran day and night. Passengers were warned not to stick their heads out windows or breathe too deeply. It was said the body wasn't meant to move that fast. Letters that once took weeks arrived in days, and while some doubted their safety, others saw the future. At worst, they were terrifying beasts that set fire to nearby crops. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was the first major line. Its earliest cars were pulled by horses until the arrival of an engine named Tom Thumb, but speed was seductive. A stagecoach averaged 5 to 8 miles per hour. A steam locomotive could double that. In the beginning, people were terrified, but that fear gave way to wonder. You could now cross 100 miles in a single day. See towns you'd only heard of. Send goods faster than weather could spoil them. Every mile of new track redefined time itself. The hands that built the rails, the tracks did not lay themselves. They were carved into mountains by Irish immigrants, their hands blistered by pick. They were driven through forests by German laborers, who saw in the woods a paycheck, not a sanctuary. They were laid across the flat, burning plains by freedmen. Former slaves paid pennies for work that killed more than it fed. And in the West, the railroads would one day be laid by Chinese workers, though that story comes later. Men worked sunup to sundown, driving spikes into wood, lifting iron rails with calloused hands. Ties were laid by eye and sweat. Accidents were frequent. Broken limbs were common. Death, often anonymous. Bridges rose from riverbeds with nothing more than rope, muscle, and sheer belief. Explosives cleared rock in mountain passes. The men drank hard, fought harder, and moved constantly living in temporary camps, far from any home. And yet, they built the spine of a continent. Each rail was 30 feet long and weighed hundreds of pounds. Each mile required 400 rails. Multiply that by 30,000 miles. This wasn't just infrastructure. It was sacrifice, forged in fire and noise. Cities born of steam. Where the trains went, towns appeared. Some sprang up overnight, built around a whistle and a depot. Others boomed, transformed from quiet hamlets into roaring centers of industry. Chicago, once a swampy outpost, became a titan. Hotels followed. Telegraph offices ticked with news from hundreds of miles away. Farmers could now send crops to market before they rotted. The American dream was now measured in miles per hour. Factories could ship goods without waiting for rivers to thaw. Atlanta rose from ashes with the tracks at its center. Railroad maps became prophecy. A city with a rail line would grow. One without would wither. Main Street now curved around the station. Banks opened beside it. The train meant population, and population meant power. You could feel it in the earth when it passed. The shake of it, the scream of the whistle, the idea that distance no longer ruled life. People chased the tracks westward, building new lives along the rails. And as the cities grew, so did their hunger for labor. Industry, labor, and the iron network. The railroads didn't just connect cities, they created industry. Coal mines exploded. In number 2, feed the furnaces. Iron foundries churned out rails, spikes, and wheels. Lumber camps stripped forests bare to make ties. Towns needed shops, schools, and saloons. Every part of the train had a supply chain. that chain became a way of life. The railroads needed steel. Steel needed coal and iron. Coal needed miners. Miners needed towns. They struck for better wages, safer conditions, fewer hours. Rail barons fought back with hired guards, blacklists, and replacement crews. An economy emerged like scaffolding around the tracks. And with it came conflict. Workers organized into early unions and shaped the fate of entire states. The tracks were laid with one eye on geography and the other on gold. Trains ran on blood and profit. Tycoons like Cornelius Vanderbilt, James J. Hill, and Jay Gould became legends, half industrialist, half villain. They battled for control, built empires of rail. Railroads were given vast public lands to expand millions of acres. And still, the trains ran, day and night, north and south, east and west. Resistance and ruin. Native nations and the Iron Trail, it turned the prairie into property. The trains didn't just carry goods and people. They carried erasure. To Native American nations, the railroad was a weapon. It brought settlers, soldiers, and the end of open space. It cut through hunting grounds. It brought fences, farms, laws. Tribes resisted. Engines burned. The government responded with cavalry and treatise most broken before the ink dried. The Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho saw the tracks not as progress but as invasion. The Union Pacific started in Omaha, Nebraska, heading west, across plains, then desert. In the 1850s and 1860s, raids targeted rail crews and stations. Tracks were torn up. The sound of the train became the sound of displacement. They were paid less, honored less, and remembered least. Each paid per mile eating, to greed, shortcuts, and disasters. Buffalo were slaughtered by the thousands, often just for sport, by passengers firing from moving trains. The railroads profited by transporting the hides and bones. The Great Plains were being rewritten, and the trains did not stop. The transcontinental dream begins. Bridges collapsed. Trains derailed at high speed. By the 1860s, the dream was no longer just regional dominant. Could you travel coast to coast without stepping off a train? In 1862, Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railway Act, launching the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. It would join the Central Pacific and Union Pacific Railroads. The Central Pacific began in Sacramento, California, facing the Sierra Nevada mountains. It was the most ambitious infrastructure project in the world at the time. Thousands of Chinese laborers toiled on the western side. They hung off cliffs with baskets and hand drills. They froze in blizzards and baked in summer dust. On the eastern side, Irish immigrants blasted rock, laid track, and built trestles across rivers that froze solid in winter. The two railroads raced toward each other, but by 1869, at Promontory Summit, Utah, the two lines met. People began to speak of standard time, an invention made necessary by the train schedules that ignored the sun's position. The golden spike was driven. The nation was bound. Part 8, Tragedy, Triumph, and the Cost of Speed. A woman could cross 3 states to reach a hospital. Soldiers could return home in days rather than weeks. Railroads changed everything, but not without cost. They brought crashes, fires, and death. In the early years, brakes were manual. Couplings crushed fingers. Passengers died. Workers died. Spectators died. The railroad also accelerated war. During the Civil War, trains moved troops, weapons, and supplies faster than ever. They became military targets. They helped win battles and end lives. The Southern economy, built around river routes and slavery, fell behind the industrial North, which had rail superiority. The country healed by connecting itself with iron. After the war, the tracks grew again. Veterans worked as conductors. Freedmen worked as porters and laborers. But memory has rusted in places. We remember the barons, but not the brakemen. The triumph, but not the toll. Part 9. America, remade by rail by 1870. The United States was no longer a slow, spread-out country of horse trails and ferries. It was a nation of motion. Mail arrived quickly. Food traveled across regions. A town in Ohio could now receive oranges from Florida, news from New York, and boots from Chicago, all by rail. Travel changed. So did death. A farmer could now bury his child and still make the morning train. The nation breathed faster, lived faster, grieved faster. The train became more than a machine. It was the bloodstream of America. The whistle fades, the tracks vanish behind the hills, but the world it left behind still hums with motion. The cities, the factories, the stories, all moved by the rhythm of the rails. In the silence after the engine has passed, we hear what remains: iron memory and the echo of everything that changed.